All right, so today I'm going to be installing some new shocks on my 2007 Harley Davidson Dyna Street Bob. And the shocks I'm going to be installing today are the Legend Revo A's. Pretty much considered to be the gold standard, pretty much the best shocks that you can buy for the money. As a matter of fact, I've seen a lot of people on YouTube that say these are like pillows for your butt. They are super smooth on the road. And kind of the interesting thing about this bike right here, so this is actually the old version of the Harley Davidson Dynas. As a matter of fact, I think this one has a lot stiffer of a suspension right out of the factory. Some people would say the suspension on these Dynas are absolutely horrific. And before you judge the suspension on a Harley Davidson, keep in mind that suspensions are pretty much like, kind of like judging a mattress on the bed. Some people like a really firm mattress, some people like it really soft, and there's all the different variations in between. As a matter of fact, I've actually seen a lot of people with these Dynas, what they'll actually do is they'll take the stock suspension and they'll get on the roads and the highways in these big cities where the roads are as smooth as glass, where they're super smooth roads, and they'll actually upgrade from the stock suspension. They'll actually put these Legend Revo A's on there, which is like $1,000 shocks on the back. And a lot of people in the big cities, they'll say, you know, I'm looking for some bumps so I can compare my old suspension with my new suspension because the roads are so smooth, you really can't tell the difference between the stock suspension and the Legend Revo A's, or some of those higher end suspensions. And kind of the interesting thing up here in the mountains of Colorado, I'm always driving on dirt roads. And as a matter of fact, if you actually come out of my driveway and go down the dead end road right by my house, it's like, it's a dirt road. And a lot of times it has the washboard rivets kind of washed out from the rain. And let me tell you, when you're driving on the stock suspension, it's like a teeth shattering ride. It'll make your teeth chatter as you're going down the road. So I actually have the stock suspension. I actually have one of the rear shocks right here. So this is what comes stock on this bike right here. And when I first bought the bike, it was so bad. I could not believe how bad these were on dirt roads. Of course, you're not supposed to take like a cruiser like this and drive them on the dirt roads. That's really not what they were designed to do. So what I actually did is I upgraded my shocks as soon as I got the bike to these shocks that are on here. Now, these are actually the cheapest progressive. Let me tell you, those cheap progressives are not much better than the stock shocks on this Harley Davidson. So it was kind of like a waste of money to upgrade to those progressives. And let me tell you, I've been riding on these shocks for 2 months, and I'm like, I have to replace these shocks. I have to improve the suspension because I'm driving primarily on dirt roads and really a lot of road damage up here in the mountains of Colorado. So what I actually did, I upgraded to these shocks, the ones I'm going to be installing today. As a matter of fact, these are super light. These are the Legend Revo A's. Take a look at those. And these are super expensive. These are about $1,000 for a pair of these. And let me tell you, I've heard incredible reviews on the Legends. And kind of the interesting thing is that the rear shocks are only half of your suspension. So the other half of the suspension is up here in the fork tubes. And the fork tubes, let me tell you, on this bike, they're absolutely horrendous too. So these are not the stock forks. They're upgraded forks. They changed the forks before I bought the bike. And let me tell you, when you're going down the road, especially when you're going around a corner, you can feel it in the handlebars. It's a little bit scary riding this bike because the suspension's so bad up here on really rough roads in the mountains of Colorado. As a matter of fact, I've actually seen a lot of people in a lot of YouTube videos, and they'll go to these like the Legends suspension, like it's kind of like a demo and a show, and they'll actually let you ride some of these bikes that have been upgraded, the front and the rear, with the really expensive Legends suspensions. And a lot of people that I've seen, they'll say they actually don't want to go back to their bike because it rides so bad compared to, you know, the best of the best as far as upgrading your suspension. There's other manufacturers too, but I'd say if you want to get into pretty much the top end of the most expensive that you can, like the highest upgrade for your bike, you can spend anywhere from like $2,000 to $3,000 upgrading your suspension, which is kind of crazy, especially if you only paid a few $1,000s for your bike. It's kind of hard to swallow that money to upgrade the suspension to make it really nice. So what we're going to do today, it's really simple. I actually swapped out my shocks once. We're going to go in and swap them out, and then after I put the new Legend Revo A's on my bike, I'm really excited about that. I'm actually going to go in and show you how to adjust them. You have to adjust the sag, which is pretty much the spring length as you sit on the bike, and you can adjust the rebound with these too. So you can get like a softer ride or a firmer ride, depending on exactly what you want to get. So let's jump over and check out, we'll actually install these shocks. And it's really super easy. It's only 2 bolts on the top and the bottom. It only takes a few minutes to actually do it. And as a matter of fact, you actually don't need a lift or anything. I just take like a car jack and put it right underneath, just jack it up just a little bit to take the pressure off the springs, and then swap out the shocks. So let's check it out. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do here is I want to loosen these 2 bolts right here and here. I want to loosen them before I get this bike up on the lift. Kind of the same thing you do with the car. You know, when you want to loosen your lug nuts before you actually put it up on the lift. So I want to just give it just a little bit of a turn here. And I want to do the same thing with this bottom here, just to make sure to kind of break the torque so we really don't have to crank on them while this is up in the air. I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side. All right, so on this side, it's a little bit tricky. On this specific version of Dyna, you actually have a nut back here. On the other side, you actually don't have a nut. It's threaded right into the front. I don't know why they do this. And they put a nut on this just on one side. You would think they could thread it right in there, but they don't. So on this one, you have to hold it and kind of break it that way. Just break it just a little bit. And I want to do the same thing on the top here and just loosen it right here. Just to kind of break the nut a little bit. Just so you don't have it jumping around on the jack, that's fine. All right, so pretty much the only thing that I use here is just this little floor jack. And I put it right here on the bottom metal part of the engine. I just jack it up a little bit. You can actually see it has like a little cup right in here. It goes right in the jack, which is nice. And then you can lift this up. This will lift the bike up and relieve the pressure from the springs as you lift it up. So from here, you just kind of want to feel to the point where it kind of loosens the tension from the spring, so you can lift the bike up away from these shocks. All right, so I'm going to start on this one first, and what you can actually do is kind of take the shocks off. You can definitely tell there's some pressure on this shock, so I'm going to lift it up a little bit, right to about there. Now I can definitely tell there's not as much pressure on this shock. As a matter of fact, I think I'm going to do the bottom one too. Kind of loosen them both up a bit and see how this is as far as the shock kind of being loose up in here. Yeah, so that would just pop right off with the released pressure on there. So it's definitely loose on there. And some of these bolts you reuse, and some of them, as a matter of fact, I actually had to go online and figure out which one to use. They have like they actually had 2 bolts. They didn't have 4. I thought they'd have 4, so you could have, I guess you reuse this one, but you don't reuse this one. And then you add some spacers. And this one's kind of interesting. It's kind of gunked up a little bit. So that one we're going to have to reuse. This one we'll have to completely use a different bolt up on the top. And kind of the interesting thing about the new shocks is they're definitely a different size compared to these. So these are 12-inch shocks. They recommend going to a 13-inch shock because essentially what happens is the shock compresses down to a 12-inch, and then you have the extra space up at the top of the shock, which is kind of an interesting concept. And I don't think you can reuse this little trim piece up on the top over here. So this it's kind of interesting. Has a little spacer right here. I'm sure we'll have to reuse the spacer. And then it has this bolt. We're not going to use that one. And then, oh, it has another spacer. I don't know if you could actually use this little spacer in here, so it'll be kind of interesting to see one versus the other. So as a matter of fact, if you actually take a look at this other shock, let me bring this other shock over and I'll kind of give you a comparison. So this one won't directly mount up because it's definitely going to be like an inch longer. You can see It's definitely an inch longer compared to this one. So what we'll have to do is we'll have to take the other shock off and then lift the bike up even more to put this shock back on, essentially is what we're going to have to do. So it's going to be kind of interesting trying to figure out the hardware components for this, because essentially this is going to have to swivel. So you'll have to have some spacers in here to where it's not flush up against here. So as a matter of fact, this fits flush up against here, but that's not the proper way to do it. You have to have a spacer in there so the shock can swivel back and forth. And that's part of the nature of this new shock system, which is kind of interesting. All right, so I'm basically doing the same thing to this side, except remember we have to block this thing from spinning, because if you just kind of do it without having any kind of a wrench on the end, it just spins around. You can't take it off. So this one is pretty loose too. But boy, I'm running into some resistance. I don't know what's going on with this bike. It seems like on a lot of my bolts, I have a lot of corrosion. I bought this bike used, and I was thinking maybe they had it outside in the weather for a while, which kind of led to all the corrosion, which is kind of crazy. All right, so I'm going to loosen the top one here, see where we're at. So this top seems pretty complicated. Take a look at this. You actually have the spacer in here, and then you have another spacer. Well, I guess you don't have a spacer there, but you do have one here, and then you have the little shield. I guess you had one on the inside and one on the outside of this little thing. It's kind of wild. Okay, so this is kind of interesting. So here's the hardware that they gave us, which is, I thought they would give us 4 bolts, but they only gave us 2 bolts, 4 spacers, and 4 washers. It's a little bit confusing as you're like, what in the world's going on? And the weird thing about this is, take a look at this. My stock bolt in here is actually an 8mm, and this is not an 8mm. The ones they gave me, this is actually a 3/8. So we have metric on the bottom, and then we have standard up on the top, which is even a little bit more confusing. You better have a full set of metric and the SAE tool set to do this job. So here's the shock, and the way the shock goes is you actually have a silver label. They say that goes on the inside, and you want the dial facing back. So this is actually the wrong side. Let me grab the other shock over here. All right, so I was actually looking online, and it didn't have exact procedures for actually doing this with this specific configuration. So I'm hoping I'm doing this right. So what I want to do is I want to do the bolt, the standard bolt, and then I'm going to do the washer that they gave me. Then I'm going to do the spacer. And see, this is supposed to swivel in here. And you're not supposed to use a big flat washer. Oh, I'll have to go and get that. All right. You're not supposed to use a big flat washer on either side in order to allow this to fully swivel. And then we have a spacer right here that we'll have to use. And I don't believe we can use this. This is not going to fit because the shock is a completely different size. So we can't reuse that, which is interesting. And then they said to use blue Loctite. Use blue Loctite on everything for this installation. So hey, I'm just kind of winging it here. If you notice I'm doing anything wrong, let me know to see if I'm doing everything right here. So a little blue. This is actually like a purple Loctite in here. So here goes nothing. Hopefully I got this right. Then we got the label, the silver label on the inside. So then from here, essentially what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to jack it up so this will fit all the way across there. So what I want to do here is I want to do a little blue Loctite on this one, purple Loctite. It's like the low strength Loctite. And then I want to do the washer that they provided, go through the shock, and then do the spacer that they provided. And see, it doesn't quite line up. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to increase the height here. And hopefully my bike doesn't fall over. That's kind of crazy. Let's see how close we are here. Pretty close. We need to go just a little bit more. Let's see. There we go. Oh, I had it right there. It'd almost be better with two people on this. I don't know. Oh, you know what? So I did mess up. This is the wrong bolt right here. We're supposed to use their bolt, not my bolt. Okay, we already made a mistake. And I need to use their bolt, and I need to put some blue Loctite on their bolt. So these are the bolts they gave me. All right, if I get this right, it'll be a miracle. So I want all this to be lined up here. Use their bolt, their washers. And oh, hopefully it's the same threads. Seems like the same threads. Doesn't quite seem like it's lining up though. All right, technical difficulties. How hard can this be? I'm gonna take this bottom off just for a second so we can make sure that I'm not stripping anything up here. There we go. The last thing I want to do is strip these out. You definitely do not want to strip those out. Looks like there's a lot of extra play right there. All right, so I'm learning at the same time I'm doing, and you guys are watching. Watching me fumble through this. All right, so we did the blue Loctite. Now we just have to tighten this one down. And this one I'm just gonna do just snug before we torque it up. I'm sure we're gonna have to torque it to the right specs on this one. They make it look so easy on the videos on YouTube. It's like, wait a minute. All right, so I don't know what happened. My camera shut off. I think my battery died. I've been using this new camera, and I thought it would record longer than it did. I actually hooked it up to an external battery now, so I don't know if you missed anything or not in this crazy demonstration. But essentially what I did is I got both shocks on, and I got all the washers and spacers and everything in there to where I think they're supposed to be. Correct me if I'm wrong if you actually look back at some of that and look at all the different, it just seems weird that it lines up kind of weird like that. And both of them move a little bit like they're supposed to, which I've seen in the Legend videos. They actually have videos on how to install these so that they're supposed to move in a little bit. And then kind of the next step is to torque these. And it says you can torque them from 30 to 40 foot-pounds, which is a huge range. So I'm actually going to go to 30 foot-pounds on my torque wrench, which is a lot, 30 foot-pounds. It's a pretty hefty torque on these. And with the blue Loctite on there, I'm sure you won't have any problems with these coming off or coming loose. So let me show you how much 30 foot-pounds is. Not too bad. Easier than I thought. I think it's because I have a little bit of leverage and I'm kind of leaning into it. Versus the other day I was like trying to torque like 25 foot-pounds and it was a little harder because of the space I was in. So this one I'm going to torque it to 30, which is right there. So 40, let me see if I can crank it to 40. 40 is kind of crazy. All right, so we're going to increase it to 40. So 30 to 40. That's just a little bit more. All right, we'll go to 40 on both of them. 30 to 40. 30 seems pretty light for shock bolts. I don't know. Oh my goodness, don't want to strip that out. Boy. All right, it just wasn't in all the way. All right, let's go to 40. Little bit more. Just move maybe 2 or 3 millimeters tighter. So that's pretty much it. All right, so I think I'm going to save the sag and then the rebound for another video because this one's kind of running long. So essentially what it is you want to measure from the center bolt to the center bolt when you're sitting on the bike and you have the full gear. So I have my full sissy bar and everything kind of full of all the gear that I normally carry on my bike. And you want this distance from here to here to be 12 inches. And then if it's not 12 inches, you can adjust these. This will actually rotate this way. You can spin these around. This is the first time I'm spinning. It seems like it spins pretty easy back and forth, and that changes the amount of compression up here. And then once you get that set to 12 inches, you take it for a ride, and then normally you set it on, they said to start on 3, which is kind of in the middle. So if you buy the Revos that are not A's, there are factory set to 3s and you can't change them. And then as you're going up and down the road, if you want a softer ride, you can move it down to 2 or 1. And if you want a stiffer ride, you can crank it all the way up to 5 or 6 to the, basically that controls the speed at which it rebounds after you kind of expand the spring. So it's kind of an interesting system on that. I think I'll save that for another day. Maybe I'll do a ride review in the next video. We'll do a ride review. We'll adjust the sag, essentially get this to 12 inches. I might need a partner to assist me. Yeah, I have to sit on it and then have to have someone here measuring from center bolt to center bolt to make sure it's 12. I don't think I could do it by myself. I'd need someone else to help me with that. So that's pretty much it. I'm gonna go on the other side and do the tightening of the bolts. I'm gonna tighten them both to 40 foot-pounds, and that's pretty much it. I'm really excited to try these out. As a matter of fact, you notice my bike is kind of dirty today. In the last video, I washed it off before I did the video. I kind of sprayed it down. Today, I was just like, I've been riding this bike every single day, so it gets dusty on my dirt roads every single day. That's why the shock looks new and the rest of the bike looks pretty dusty. And I'm really dusty from crawling around on the ground, getting this thing kind of going here. So that's pretty much it, guys. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.